Hey, you're listening to the wrong podcast. Topics today include Marvel, misquotes, and money, money, money.
Wrong! What's wrong with you? What's wrong with y'all?
What's wrong with you?
What's wrong with you people? Wrong! You do have to tolerate it. It's my show.
Hi, I'm Tim. I'm here to talk about politics, culture, religion, sports, and anything else you're not allowed to talk about in polite company. Issue number 1! Stupid heroes. There's this thing. I'm a graphic designer, and this formula works for other things as well. But I try to explain to clients that there are 3 options for them, and they get to pick 2. The first is, do you want it good? The second is, do you want it fast? The third is, do you want it cheap? Good, fast, cheap. You choose which 2 you want. Well, I have a similar formula for superhero movies. And you get to pick 2 of the 3 things, and you have the potential for a good superhero movie. But if you pick all 3, you are choosing to have a bad superhero movie. Are you ready? The first thing is superpowers. Some sort of extraordinary feat that normal people don't have. The second is Earth. Do you want the story to take place on Earth? The third is space. Do you want the setting, the story to take place somewhere other than Earth? Somewhere out in the universe, different galaxy, whatever. Let me give you an example of a movie that has 2 of these things, but not all 3. Star Wars. The Jedi have superpowers, and they live somewhere other than Earth. A different example, Superman. He has superpowers. He lives on Earth. A third example, Guardians of the Galaxy. You have an Earth figure, an Earthling, a human, who lives in outer space, but does not have superpowers. You get to choose 2 of the 3. Here is an example of something where all 3 were chosen. Green Lantern. You got a man with superpowers on Earth who also travels to space. You could add, the Fantastic Four to this. There's lots of other examples. And it just doesn't work. Once you take the superpowers and you put them in space, you don't know what the dynamics and the physics are in outer space, but you do know what they are on Earth. So you've confined you've confined the physics to Earth, and then you try to take the Earth physics into space, and it just doesn't make sense anymore. What used to be this thing that would destroy the world is now like some sort of galaxy eater. Like, how big is it? What's it actually take to stop it? We don't know. And that's fine. You can be out in space with those superpowers, but you better keep the Earth physics and dynamics out of the story. Now, I was talking with my friend Seth, who refuses to listen to my podcast, but always asks me what I'm going to talk about on my podcast. He's always interested, but will not listen. And really, I need your advice on how to handle Seth, because this just seems to be an inappropriate use of our friendship, to get a sneak preview of the podcast, but not actually listen. So anyways, Seth added, what about time travel? And that's very simple. Time travel always ruins superhero movies. Always. Superman flying around the Earth, making it go backwards. The Avengers going back in time and killing somebody or stopping something. It's just, time travel always messes up a story. That doesn't mean all time travel movies are bad. I like time travel movies. Back to the Future, great time travel movie. Guess what it didn't have? Somebody with superpowers. As long as there's no superpowers involved, I think you can have a time travel movie. But not with superheroes. Issue number 2! Quote, misquote. There's a very simple way to get evangelical Christians to believe something. that may not be true. And that is to say something pithy and claim that C.S. Lewis wrote it. Evangelicals love C.S. Lewis. We're not the only Christians who love C.S. Lewis, but we really do. It's like a marker of the culture. And so, when you're on social media and you see a pithy quote and somebody said C.S. Lewis said it, well, you can be pretty sure that people are going to hit share. And I thought I would share with you some very common quotes that are not actually from C.S. Lewis, but people think they are, and that's why they get shared more. The first is, humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. That actually comes from Rick Warren's The Purpose-Driven Life. A very popular book. In fact, more popular than anything C.S. Lewis has written. The second, children are not a distraction from more important work. They are the most important work. Great quote. I don't have any problem with this. Here's the funny thing about this quote. C.S. Lewis didn't like children. Now, he wrote some children's books, and maybe he did in fact think they were the most important work. But this would be an unusual quote from C.S. Lewis. It actually came from a man named John Trainer, and he even validated the fact that he originated the quote on a Facebook post. I don't know who John Trainer is. I don't know if he knows who C.S. Lewis is, but I do know he thinks children are the most important work. Okay, this one is fun. Dear Wormwood, be sure that the patient remains completely fixated on politics, arguments, political gossip, and obsessing on the faults of people. This one looks like it's from the Screwtape Letters. It starts with Dear Wormwood. And if you've read the Screwtape Letters, which is a book supposedly written by a master demon training up a younger demon in the arts of demonology, he always starts his letters with Dear Wormwood, because that's the younger demon. Well, we don't know who wrote this one, but it's not found in the Screwtape Letters. It's somebody writing in the style they clearly feel inspired and drawn to the device that C.S. Lewis created, but it is not from C.S. Lewis. And then this last one, this is the one you've probably seen on more than one occasion. And there's a lot I want to have to say about it. Are you ready? I'm ready. You don't have a soul. You are a soul. You have a body. Now, this didn't come from C.S. Lewis. I've seen lots of debates about this. It cannot be found anywhere in anything C.S. Lewis wrote. It's actually from an author that C.S. Lewis liked a lot. His name was George MacDonald, and he wrote in his book, Annals of a Quiet Neighborhood, he had this to say: the great mistake of teaching children that they have souls, and then it goes on to say, they ought to be taught that they have bodies, and that their bodies die, while their souls live on. Later, he was also quoted as saying, in a magazine article, he was quoted as saying, never tell a child, you have a soul. Teach him, you are a soul, and you have a body. Now, I understand why Christians like this quote. They like it because it talks to the reality of our soul, that we are more than our bodies. But I don't think the quote is actually Christian. I think it actually defies Christianity. There was a rival philosophy with Christianity as Christianity was emerging called Gnosticism. I've talked about this before. It's the idea that our bodies aren't real, that the only thing that really matters is our soul, and our bodies are actually corrupt. If we have them at all, if they exist, they're corrupt. We should neglect them. We should not care for them because our soul is what matters. And we are living through a period of modern Gnosticism where people think their bodies aren't important. What's important is how you feel. What you think is true of yourself is what's most true, not what your body actually is. And Christianity teaches this thing called dualism, that we are both a soul and a body. We have a soul, we have a body. They are linked in very important ways, and they are both very important, and we dare not neglect one or the other. Sorry, I know, I'm here ruining everything. Remember, I want to know what's wrong with you.
What's wrong with you?
If you'd like to submit a question, topic, or tell me how I was wrong, you can email me at listen@therewrongpodcast.com or submit a comment at my website, therewrongpodcast.com, and help me spread the wrong message. If you like what you hear, share it with your friends. Now it's time for my favorite part of the show. I was wrong.
I was wrong. I was wrong.
Listener Jason. I actually saw him in person recently, and he told me that he really appreciates the show and sometimes listens to some episodes twice. Dang. Thanks, dude. That's a lot of Tim. And a lot of Tim on repeat. That's right. It's a lot of Tim on repeat. And while I'm talking about what listeners have to say about the show, I wanted to talk about the show itself a little bit. I do this thing at the end of the show, which is just nuts. I invalidate everything I had to say for the entirety of the episode. I say, but I could be wrong. If you think I am, let me know, and let me know why. This is nuts. This is not a good way to end an opinion podcast. I want people to think I am certain. I want people to know that I've thought about this thing and there's no ambiguity in my thoughts. This is the way it is, and this is how you should think. And I destroy that at the very end of every episode. This show is not going to grow because of that final line. That's not what people want. Go listen to Dan Bongino sometime. Listen to Candace Owens. Listen to Rachel Maddow. They're certain. They know what's true. And I am not offering that here. Along those lines, there's this public theologian. His name's Russell Moore. I really, really like him. I like him a lot. And he is, he used to be part of the Southern Baptist Convention and recently departed ways with the denomination. Still a Christian, still a theologian, still completely devoted to his faith in exactly the same ways. He's just not part of that organization anymore. Now he's working for Christianity Today, and he has his own podcast. And he just started a new format for his podcast. He does several things with this podcast, but one of the formats is this thing called Tell Me Where I Was Wrong. And he has somebody on his show who disagrees with him on something. For example, his latest episode was on the death penalty. And he allows the other person to explain to him why he is wrong. And Russell does not argue or debate with the other person. All he allows himself to do is ask questions. Could you clarify? What about this situation? What did you think about this? Have you thought about this? That's all he's allowed to do. It's brilliant. I really like the format. It's a great idea. But I got a bone to pick with Russell Moore. And that is what you're about to listen to. This is how he concludes each of those shows.
But I could be wrong. And so I'm going to think about that much more. I encourage you to think about it and let me know.
What the heck, Russell? Here I am working away in obscurity, and you steal my bit. I got bad news for you, Russell. It's not going to work. Issue number 3! I wouldn't bet on it. So I have this philosophy, and it's summed up in this thing I wrote recently about getting my child vaccinated. And I'll just read it to you, since, I'm quoting myself here, but that's okay. A simple path to wisdom is to think of what you would tell a poor person to do, and then do it, even if you can afford not to. And there is a blight in our culture that I think is wreaking havoc on the poor, and people are unconcerned about it, and it's going to get worse. And that is with gambling. I think it's a systemic problem. It's not a problem that affects one or two people. I think the whole system is built in a way to exploit the poor. Let me explain. We talk about systemic racism, where certain things are configured in ways where whites are advantaged and non-whites are not, or that blacks are specifically disadvantaged. People have done a lot of work pointing out these areas. We also talk about systematic misogyny, where men are preferred over women. We understand how systems can impact black people and women. Sometimes systems are designed to help the rich and not the poor. And that is the case with gambling. It is designed to help the rich and to hurt the poor. Let me start first with payday loans. This doesn't have to do with gambling, but I think I can draw it out more clearly if I describe the payday loan situation to you. In many places, you will find a place that will cash checks for a fee, and they will also offer you an advance on your paycheck, up to 2 weeks in advance or whatever. If you've got a job, we'll give you a check today, and this check will cost you $30 right now. So you're going to lose $30, and then you pay us back once you get paid. If you don't pay us back on your payday, then we are going to charge you an exorbitant interest rate. It's like not even close to what credit cards are like. It's like 200% interest. If you don't pay us back on that day, it's going to cost you twice as much as we gave you. And that is usury. That is debilitating debt that you're inflicting on people. And the Bible actually speaks very clearly about this, that it shouldn't exist, that you shouldn't exploit people when you loan money to them. But it's legal in the United States. It's fine to do this, and people get totally taken advantage of it by it. Whatever benefit they would have that they got from getting that paycheck early is wiped out if they do not pay that back immediately. They would have been better off with the first consequence than whatever kind of consequences are going to come later when all this mounting debt happens to them. And really, we should curse and spit every time we see a payday loan place. You really should. They are not good. Talk to any bankruptcy attorney about the fruitfulness of those places, and they will agree with me. They're awful. A second place that exploits the poor. Oh, and here's the deal with payday loans. Sorry to go back. Guess where you find those places? You don't find them in the rich neighborhoods. You won't find a payday loan place on Rodeo Drive in Beverly Hills. They're always in the poorest neighborhoods. They exist to take money from the poor. Even if the people who are using their services pay it back and aren't faced with the interest on their loans, they're still getting that $30 taken off their check. And if they do that every time, if they never catch up, they're losing, $30 every 2 weeks. That adds up, and that's real money that could make a difference in their lives. Second place is the lotto. The lotto is legalized gambling that the state benefits from. The state's like, hey, most states at least, we're not going to have gambling unless we run it, unless it's a government-run operation. No private interest in this. We get to do it. And again, you don't see rich people playing the lotto all that much. They don't need to. Who really likes to play the lotto are lower income individuals. They love it. They play all the time. They play weekly. And the lotto is it's an utter waste of money. Yes, somebody wins, but the chances of you winning are astronomical. You're basically just burning your money and hoping it turns into a treasure chest. Like that kind of magic trick would be almost as likely to happen as you winning the lotto. And low-income individuals love to play. Again, you don't see lotto stores set up in rich neighborhoods. You don't see people lining up on the big payday on Rodeo Drive so they can buy their lotto tickets. It's at the convenience store in the lower-income neighborhoods where people love to do this. And if they put their money elsewhere, if they if they're paying $5 a week or whatever, if they put that into a reasonable mutual fund or an index fund, they would actually come out with quite a bit of money after 20 or 30 years of that kind of behavior. It would make a difference in their lives when they're at retirement age. This is a system that the state has set up that hurts the poor. It's taking money from poor people and putting it into government programs. Now, gambling, legalized gambling, I think, is similar to the death penalty. Maybe you can, maybe philosophically you can justify its existence, but there's no doubt that it disproportionately affects the poor more than the rich. The poor are hurt by it more than the rich are. If you are poor, the temptation to get out of poverty is huge. You want a fast way out. That's what poverty can do to people. It causes them to make unwise decisions because they're so desperate to get out of that poverty. They need a way out. And yes, some of their decision making is part of why they're poor. But these kind of legalized systems aren't helping matters by giving them this faint hope that they can win their way out of it through games of luck. And if you are participating in gambling, whether it's sports gambling or casinos or the lotto, you need to recognize that you are involved in that system. And if you're winning, some of that money that you've won came from a poor person's wallet. Yes, they made a free choice, as you did. Everybody's making free choices to do this. But that doesn't mean the system's fair. That doesn't mean it's beneficial or righteous. And part of what as I've grown to hate gambling more and more, I'll tell you a quick personal story about why I hate gambling. And it goes beyond this story, but it's stories are always good. So we had foster kids who lived with us, and they were homeless from there were two brothers, and they had two younger brothers. For about 5 years, they were homeless, living in a minivan, driving around the country. And their father would drive them around from relative to relative, trying to borrow money so that he wouldn't have to work. He had some serious mental health issues, and his wife had battered wife syndrome, and she didn't speak English, so she, didn't know how to get help if she wanted it. So he would, travel around, he'd borrow money from relatives, and then he'd immediately take the cash, the $1,000 he was given, and go to a casino and try to roll it into, make it become $5,000. And you know how gambling works. They aren't building those towers in Las Vegas because you've got a fair shot at winning. Everything's always tilted towards the house. The house always wins. That's how it's set up. And, he would take this money his family desperately needed and lose it all. And then they would drive to the next relative's house. For 5 years, those boys weren't going to school. And when they needed money and they couldn't get it from a relative, he would have them go beg outside of grocery stores so they would have something to eat. Just gross. Again, mental health is a huge part of that story. The whole story isn't about gambling, and he would have found other ways to lose the money, I'm sure, or to have spent it unwisely. But gambling for sure wasn't helping. So I am not advocating that we eliminate gambling, but you need to know that gambling is going to be on the rise. You're going to see more and more of it. Sports gambling is becoming legalized in all 50 states very soon, or if not all of them, most of them. Fox Sports West, a sports channel I watch, has just rebranded itself as Bally Sports because they're going to start promoting gambling during the games they show. I was watching the World Series, and during the game, the broadcasters were announcing, hey, there's 5-1 odds that so-and-so gets a hit right here. There's, 17-1 odds that there's a strikeout in this situation. They're going to do this because there's going to be apps where you can gamble on what what the announcer just said. You can put in a bid on whether or not you think it's going to happen. And that's going to be on all sports all the time. It's going to be an issue for me watching sports. I have decided that not only do I not want to participate in gambling, but I don't want to be a part of the culture of gambling. And so that means, March Madness, I love to fill out a bracket to see if I can guess who's going to win the basketball tournament, but I'm not putting money on it. And fantasy football, fantasy baseball, same thing. I love playing them. I'll continue to play them, but I'm not going to put money into it. And if I'm just playing a game with my friends, a game of poker, I'm not going to play for real money. I think card games are fine, but I'm not going to play for money. Instead, I think gambling on silly stunts or who has to make dinner, I think those are fine ways to get the same kind of experience out of it, but without participating in the system of gambling. But I could be wrong. If you think I am, let me know, and let me know why. I had fun, and I hope you did too. Bye-bye.
You are listening to the Wrong Podcast, where you can come to hear about politics, religion, and anything else you're not allowed to talk about in polite company. I'm Tim, and I was wrong. I was wrong.